Hello, everybody. I'm Riley Woodall, and welcome to the Toss-Up. After a long spring, summer, and fall, college hoops returns to Bloomington, and Hoosier Nation is fired up to get back inside Assembly Hall. Today, it's everything Indiana basketball, and we're previewing what fans can expect from Mike Woodson in his third year at the helm. Stick around, because it's all next on the Toss-Up. Well, it's that time of year again. A time to watch gladiators clash on the hardwood, a time to hear the perfect swish of the net, and a time to feel the energy and passion from student sections all across the country. It's a time for heartbreaking defeats and history-making moments. A time to laugh, a time to cry, and a time to celebrate. A time to hop back on the carousel of emotions that make all of us love this game so much. In 49 states, it's just basketball. But in Indiana, it's just different. It's finally time for the Indiana Men's Basketball Show here on the Toss-Up, and we have another stacked panel joining me. Kara Adams, one of the IUSTV Sports men's basketball beat reporters. Hayden Smith coming down from Hoosier Network country. Our very own William McDermott reporting for Inside the Hall, and our own Cruz Martin is also in the studio with us. He is one of the WIUX men's basketball beat reporters, or rather men's basketball broadcaster, excuse me. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. Kara, I'm going to go to you first.
All right.
Basketball is finally back.
Finally.
It feels like it's been forever,
it does.
Right? But this Indiana team looks a little bit different
right.
than last year. You lose Trayce Jackson-Davis. You lose Jalen Hood-Schifino, both to the draft. Your two best point scorers. A lot of new faces on this Indiana team. Who is going to step up, and how do you think this offense is going to fare with those two guys now gone and playing in the Pro League?
Well, you said it. There's a lot of new faces. So we're going to need to see a lot of different players step up. Xavier Johnson's going to have to be a key contributor and be that leader that Coach Woodson keeps emphasizing that he needs to be. Malik Renew is going to have to become a strong sophomore presence, as well as Trey Galloway, Xavier. They're your captains. They're really going to be expected to lead and be key contributors to this offense. But there's so many new faces, new transfers, so it'll be interesting to see how it really plays out once they get through these exhibition games and really into the meat of the season.
Yeah, I think the offense is going to be really interesting to look at for this Hoosier team this year. I think defensively, this Indiana team could be one of the best defensive teams that Mike Woodson has had during his tenure here and probably in the last 5-ish years for Indiana basketball. I think that's where they're going to thrive this season. It's the offensive end where I think there's going to be a lot of question marks. You've got Xavier Johnson coming back after last year. Trey Galloway's coming back. But beyond that, you got a lot of question marks surrounding this team and how good they could potentially be.
I think the offense is going to go through the front court again for the third year in Mike Woodson's tenure. Khalil Ware, a guy who can stretch the floor. Woodson hasn't had that with Race Thompson and Trayce Jackson-Davis. And I still think Malik Renew can be that back-to-the-basket player and a solid post threat. I think it's still going to run through the bigs. But like you said, having X back is going to be critical.
So I'm going to bring Cruz in here for his first question. Cruz, you actually called the U-Indy game with Hayden Smith here on the panel last Sunday. Some good, some bad, and some ugly. But growing pains to be expected with this team. What were your takeaways from the game? What did you see, and how do you think the Hoosiers can improve?
Well, obviously there was a lot of roster turnover over the last couple of months. So for Indiana, bringing in these new guys and getting them implemented into Mike Woodson's system and getting them to play with the newcomers and playing with the returners from last season is going to be big time for Indiana. Putting together 40 minutes is also big. We saw the difference in the first half compared to the second half. The first 20 minutes, obviously not the best basketball that this team could play, but that's to be expected. The second 20 minutes looked fantastic. As for the third reason, knowing roles is going to be big. Gabe Cupps was a prime example of that, coming off the bench and providing a spark off the bench, making sure he had defensive deflections. If anybody can find out their role on this team, it's going to really help out this team.
Well, one of the biggest question marks that I have, and I think a lot of people have, guys, is a lack of three-point presence and consistency, rather, at that position and at that part has been lacking for several years. So who do you think is someone that can really step up in that position and be that go-to guy from beyond the arc? Hambone, I'm going to you first. Shout out to my man, Joe Cronin.
And I meant to say earlier, that intro you wrote out just had me choking up.
Thank
Pulling
you.
on the heartstrings.
Just for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Just for
It's
you.
beautiful.
For me, the guy from beyond the arc that needs to be great is Mackenzie Mbako, 5-star freshman from New Jersey. It might not be the popular pick. He's the most NBA-ready player that Indiana has. And he proved that he can shoot in high school. He made a 3 on Sunday against UIndy. He's going to have to be the guy that steps up and can knock down shots consistently. I think from X and Trey Galloway, you're going to be able to get 33+% of their three-pointers to go in. He's going to be the difference maker. And then another guy that I figured I'd mention, Khalil Ware. Can he stretch the floor consistently? Can he knock down over 30% of his threes? He didn't do it a year ago.
Yeah, I think Mackenzie Mbako, going forward into the season, he's a freshman, so he's going to experience those ups and downs. He's going to go on those cold stretches eventually. So that's why I'm going to go with a guy that proved that he can be a three-point shooter last season in Trey Galloway. He hit a career high in three-pointers made last year, shot over 45% from beyond the arc. And I think he's going to be a go-to guy for the Hoosiers beyond the arc this year because you're going to have a lot of congestion in the paint with Khalil Ware, Khalil Ware, Mackenzie Mbako, and Malik Renew. So, and then you're going to have Trey Galloway that's going to have a lot of open shots, but teams are going to respect him a lot more.
Renew, I think, is about due to have a good season, right? I think he's going to be really big for the Hoosiers. Kara, go ahead.
Well, I think everyone's expecting Trey Galloway, to step up and be that key three-point shooter. But I'm going to go with Gabe Cupps. I think he's going to provide a new spark off the bench. We know he's disciplined. We know he's gritty. And if he gets hot, I think he could be that key three-point shooter. But it'll be interesting to see how his role plays out because he probably won't be a starter heading in at the beginning of the season. But it'll be interesting to see what he does off the
next
bench.
coming of Jordan Holes right there.
You said it. There we go.
Well, I'm going to bring Cruz back in here. Cruz, Indiana, 12th in the Big Ten in three-point field goals made last year. Yikes. Where does it start for this Hoosier squad, and how do you see them improving those numbers this season?
Well, the first thing that Mike Woodson and his staff did was bring in shooters, Mackenzie Mbako, Gabe Cupps, a couple of names to throw out there. Khalil Ware can even extend the floor and knock down a couple of threes, and also putting in the work. Hayden, you mentioned Trey Galloway, who really improved his three-point shot last year. If Indiana's able to spread the floor, they have two really good bigs in Malik Renew and Khalil Ware down low. That'll help them space the floor out, not only on the perimeter, but also inside so the bigs can get their touches as well. And from there, it's just shooting the shots. I mean, Indiana only shot 10 three-pointers in their game the other day. It's not going to fly, especially in a game that revolves so much around the three-point shot these days. Indiana going to have to step up and knock down some threes this season. That's something they did not do last year.
Well, I'll tell you another guy who's got a nice touch, CJ Gunn. And, I talked to you guys a little bit about this before we went on the air, but Trey Galloway had high praise for him. There's a lot of teammates of his that have really high praise for him. But we'll see if that ends up coming to fruition this season. So, Kara, we'll get into some more specifics of the team. Who is the most underrated player, in your opinion, on this Indiana basketball squad?
That's a tough one because I think there's so many new players who are so solid, but we haven't really seen what they can do. But I'm going to go with Malik Renew. I think he had a solid freshman year season. He did he did his job, but it was hard to get a lot of high praise when you had Race and TJD right in front of you. But I think this year, Coach Woodson keeps talking about how he needs more from him. He's a sophomore. He has to step up. But I think he can do it, and I think he's going to be a player that surprises Indiana fans, and not necessarily surprises, but really just steps up and does his job this year.
We've talked about a lot of roster turnover, Hayden. 10 new faces on this Hoosier basketball squad. Which newcomer do you think is going to be the most critical for Indiana's success this season?
Yeah, I think the obvious answer would be somebody like Mackenzie Mbako or Khalil Ware, but I'm going to go in a different direction and say Anthony Walker because I really enjoyed his game against UIndy. Granted, it's an exhibition game. You're going to expect some other guys to produce a little bit more than they're probably going to produce in the regular season. But he was a key glue guy for Miami's Final Four run last year, and I think he could provide a very similar situation with the Indiana Hoosiers this season. I loved his defense, and I think that will go a long way this season.
We'll go from the newcomers to the veterans on this team, and one of those being Xavier Johnson-Durham. IU lost that key piece for their squad early on in the season last year, broken foot against Kansas. He gets the medical red shirt. They get him back for another year. How important do you think is having him back for another season for Indiana?
Well, they missed him, Riley.
Right.
I mean, there's no question about that. And you could even tell, especially in March Madness against faster and quicker teams like Miami that they struggled against, they needed a guy like X to kind of be that defensive anchor. And I think that's one of the more underrated parts of his game that he's going to be bringing to Indiana in his sixth season of college basketball now that he's back healthy. And we saw it in the UIndy game, 2 steals, just the ball pressure he's able to apply. get up in the face of the opposing point guard. That's the thing that Indiana is going to have with him back, and they missed it a lot last year. Jalen Hood-Schifino, a competent defender, but obviously more gifted offensively. With X's experience and his speed, it's going to make a difference.
So, Cruz, I'm bringing you back in for this one. As you look at this IU schedule and what they're going to have to face, two things jump out at me in the early stages, specifically in the non-con. They face UConn, defending national champions at the Empire Classic, and Kansas in Bloomington inside Assembly Hall a little over a week before Christmas. How do you see those games playing out for the Hoosiers?
Well, Mike Woodson staying true to his words. He said these are the games that Indiana wants to play. He's building off of what Indiana did last year when they played teams like Kansas and North Carolina. Of course, UConn, the defending national champions. Kansas, the #1 team in the country coming into this season. Indiana wants to play these games because it's only going to make them better. Now, for Indiana fans, it might not be the result you want, especially with a team that has a lot of roster turnover this year in the Indiana Hoosiers playing some of the best teams in the country. It might not be a W in the win column, but I think Mike Woodson has his mindset on the bigger picture, getting good experience for his young guys and his brand new team, so that way whenever March comes around, they'll be ready for the task.
So, guys, I hate to do it to you, but it's one of the hardest things to predict. But early season predictions, you got to take a shot in the dark a little bit. Indiana's conference record in the regular season. What do you guys got?
It's you're exactly right. It's a shot in the dark because all we've seen from Indiana is one exhibition game, and like you said, there's just so much roster turnover that there's too many questions, and you don't know what you're going to get from this group. So, based off of that fact alone, I think Indiana is going to be lucky to get around 10 games that they win in the Big Ten Conference. It's going to be really close for them, and I don't know. The Big Ten, it's kind of a down year this year for the Big Ten, but you've got stacked competition up top with Michigan State and Purdue.
A down year for the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, after those teams.
Yeah, but you would think having two teams in the top 5 preseason, that should
Exactly, but after that, I feel like it drops off a little bit.
I think you've got multiple sleeper teams that we'll get
100%.
into later, but in terms of the conference record, I think you're right, sitting around 10 wins. Last year they got 12, third seed in the Big Ten tournament via the tiebreaker. I think 10, 11, they've got a relatively easy schedule. Only got Michigan State once. That's going to help them out, and they got them here in Assembly.
Kara?
I'm going to go 12-8 like last season.
Ooh,
I think
okay.
that's, I don't know. I think Indiana, they really emphasize not losing at home in Big Ten in Big Ten conference play. So I think if they can get some of those key wins at home, that'll help them a lot. I mean, last year we saw they lost to Northwestern by 1 point at home. I think if they can get over the hump for games like that early on in Big Ten conference play, then I think they can go 12-8.
Well, it's going to be a tough road for the Hoosiers no matter what, but maybe they might have something going for them by the time Big Ten play really rolls around. We're just going to have to wait and see. But stick around, because coming up after the break, we play everyone's favorite game show to make some way too early college hoops predictions. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Men's College Hoops Show. It's time for another edition of Who You Got. I've got 5 questions lined up. I'm going down the line through each of the panelists, and they have 15 seconds to give me their answers. Guys, you ready?
We're ready.
Do it.
All right,
Let's do it.
I'm going to you
Okay.
first. Which non-IU game are you most excited for?
UNC UConn, 2 top 25 teams during Jimmy V week. It's going to be a good one.
Hayden.
Michigan State, Duke at the United Center, 2 top 5 teams. That's going to be great.
Michigan State, Purdue in March. It's going to decide the Big Ten champion.
And Cruz.
Hayden, I'm right with you there. Michigan State and Duke's going to be a fantastic matchup in Chicago.
Cruz, I'm coming right back to you. Biggest sleeper team in the Big Ten.
I'm going to say Northwestern, and a lot of people have given me some tough criticism about this. But Boo Buie coming back, Big Ten all-first team last season. They lose Chase Audige, but they got a lot of people coming in from the transfer portal. I think that Northwestern will be right there this year.
Hayden, are you one of those that is giving him a little bit of...
100%. 100%.
That was too. That's ridiculous. Northwestern, no. But
So who's your
Ohio
pick?
State, I love the addition of Jamison Battle. Middleton, the freshman's excellent. Bruce Thornton, one of their guards, averaged 10 as a freshman last year. primed for a big breakout sophomore season.
I'm going to go with Wisconsin. I think Connor Essegian and Tyler Wall, they're going to be great for Wisconsin this year, and they're going to build off of what they did last year.
I'm going to go Maryland. So got some new faces, but some old faces. I think this could be their year.
So I'm slinging it right back to you. Who is the best team in college basketball? It does not have to be the team that you pick to win the national championship.
Duke. They're the best team, I think, so far right now. A couple key players are returning and new freshmen.
I know they just lost to Illinois in an exhibition, but I got to go with the Kansas Jayhawks. You got to trust in Bill Self.
Michigan State, they got the best guard duo in the country. They have the experience in the backcourt. Best recruiting class in the Big Ten.
And Cruz.
I'd have to say it's a toss-up between Kansas and Duke, but I'm taking the Blue Devils over the Jayhawks.
So, Cruz, I'm coming back to you once again. How far do you think Indiana will go in the NCAA tournament?
I wish I could say I'm an optimist, but I would say round of 32 is probably as far as Indiana's going to get this year.
So they're gonna match what they did last year.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm thinking round of 64. I think they sneak in as an 8 or 9 seed, maybe a 7, 6 if they get some big wins. It's going to be tough.
I'm right with Durham there. I think round of 64, in all honesty, they might be going to Dayton this year.
Wow. Okay.
I guess I'm the optimist. Sweet 16. I think they go one more than last year, 2 more than Woodson's first year here. They're going to the Sweet 16.
Okay.
All right, Kara, your last question. Who wins the national championship? Way too early. Season predictions, bold prediction. Who you got?
I'm going to go Kansas. They're a very young team right now, but I think by the time we get to tournament time, they'll be ready and feel more experienced after some of their big non-conference games and conference play.
Well, I didn't say this whenever we were talking earlier, but I'm going to go with Michigan State. I think I'm completely flipping the switch. Completely flipping the switch. I think their guard play is going to be great come March, and Tom Izzo, you got to trust in him. Michigan State always makes a deep run in March. Expect them to do the same.
Michigan State, Elite 8 team a year ago. This is one of the best teams Tom Izzo has had in recent years. I just love the backcourt, Riley. I think it's excellent. You can never count Izzo out in March.
Cruz, close us out.
Yeah, I got Duke, guys. I mean, the recruiting class they brought in this year mixed in with the veterans they're bringing back. It's hard to see the Blue Devils not winning it all this year.
Well, give me the Jayhawks. I'll just say it. You can't really bet against them. That's my prediction, but we'll see how it goes. I might be a sellout for that one, but it's all right. That's going to do it for us this week. Be sure to follow our new Instagram and Twitter at the TossUpIU and the TossUp23 respectively, and follow IUSTV Sports, Inside the Hall, and WIUX for coverage of IU men's basketball all season long. Before we end the show, I want to take a moment and say a prayer for Bob Knight and his family. The Indiana basketball legend passed away at the time this show is being filmed. He was 83 years old. While he's no longer with us, he will always be in our hearts, and his impact on Indiana basketball and generations of Hoosier fans won't be forgotten. He was, is, and always will be one of the best to ever do it, and he will go down as the greatest Indiana basketball coach of all time. Rest in peace, Bobby. We love you. We'll see you next week. God bless.